Welcome back, everybody. Today we're looking at the Hruodland Pilot Turbine. This is one from AliExpress. It's a larger dial, manual wind, great leather strap. Really looking forward to taking this out on the job. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear review. Today we're going to be looking at a pilot watch, a classical design called the Flieger style pilot watch. This is a Type A, which means it has the hour markers. This is also a highly affordable watch, so you're going to see some things on here that are typically not at all part of a typical Flieger style pilot watch. And there's a reason for it. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more fun, a little bit different, and also it's much more affordable, quite frankly. And so I looked at the other models that are out there, you know, the IWCs, the Stovas, the Lacos, and I appreciate the history behind them. I appreciate the design and the quality that goes into them. I'm just not ready to pay thousands of dollars for this kind of watch. So I'm going to offer this up as an alternative. It's a kind of a different take on it, but you get a lot of the same design features and qualities. And frankly, this is one of the watches that shocked me as far as quality goes. And I'll show you at the very end of this, towards the end of this video, one of the features about this watch, the Hruodland Pilot Turbine watch from AliExpress, one of the features about this watch was a double take. Like, you've got to be kidding me. So let's get started with just a brief history of what the Flieger watch is all about. We'll go through the 5 typical things we go through: size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and loom. Wrap it up with some conclusions and recommendations at the end. Upon Charles Lindbergh's successful transatlantic flight, he returned back to the United States and collaborated with Longines Watch Company to make the hour angle watch. The hour angle watch was a new tool that would allow a pilot to know exactly where they were longitudinally on a map. The idea was based on the premise that the Earth rotates 360 degrees in a 24-hour period. Therefore, the hour hand, minute hand, and second hand could be used to calculate different degrees of travel longitudinally in much smaller or larger increments. The German Luftwaffe considered the hour angle watch design, but instead decided to go with the current Flieger design, which is a much more simplified dial, very legible dial, large 55 millimeter, highly contrast dial with the markers. You have the loom that's also on the hands and the markers, and also it has a large onion style crown that you can manipulate with gloves on. Something that's really important is that the Flieger style watch was extremely accurate. It needed to be accurate to make these calculations as not only a redundancy to other navigational tools on board, but also for coordinated attacks. And also if your sortie went off course, pilots had to have the ability to navigate from a variety of means at their disposal, and this was one of them. One of the important features between both the hour angle watch and the Flieger style watch was the hacking ability. Prior to any type of sortie or flight or mission, the pilots would all coordinate their watches to a standard base time, and they would use that accurate watch, highly regulated watch, on their flight to do whatever they needed to do. And there was no guarantee that they were going to come back the same way that they went out, and so all of these different navigational tools were part of the toolbox that these pilots had. Whether they were German Air Force, Allied Air Force, they had the same basic principle: a watch that could hack, highly contrasting, highly legible dial, and something that could be used in the daytime and also at night with some loom. And so these watches were increasingly more valuable as time went on. The next development in the flight watch was the chronometer, which could measure these time increments whenever the pilot wanted to start and stop the chronometer. So with that historical backdrop, we're going to look at this watch as certainly one that has taken creative liberties in how it was designed, with the inclusion of that turbine, small seconds at the 6 o'clock position, and also some of the other just kind of design features of this watch are close to the Flieger. They certainly aren't as a one-to-one version of it that you might see with IWC or Laco or Stova. So we're looking at a watch that is in that realm of Flieger style pilot watches. Some of the things I think that you need to keep in mind around the Flieger style pilot watch, again, is a large case diameter, which this watch has a larger style case diameter. Highly legible, so the contrast in this dial is huge. I think the white markers, the deep blue sunburst dial really stand out. And because it's also a larger dial, there's just a lot more space for those numbers to live in the hour markers to live in, so that it's not so hard to read what the time is. And then also a large onion-style crown that's useful for manipulating or checking the time. Something this watch doesn't have is a hacking movement. So this watch does not hack, and that's unfortunate, because that's a huge part of what the Flieger style watch is all about, is to have that hacking coordination of time piece to it. So unfortunately, that's not part of this watch, and for that reason, it's a little bit less of a Flieger style watch. But you're going to find out later in this video what this watch has that is probably more fortunate than it was intentional. But we'll find that out towards the end. We're going to go through the 5 typical things that we go through, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and loom. And we'll talk again about just how this watch is useful for those highly legible situations that you might need a watch like this for. So let's start off with size. It's a 43 millimeter diameter case with a 12.4 millimeter height. And so the proportions of this watch, I really like the proportions of this watch, because it's when you look at this watch, it looks like the height matches up with the width. When you look at another watch, and I'll put a picture up on the screen here of the Islander pen, which is also a 12 millimeter watch, but it's a 36 millimeter diameter case, and it just appears to be more chunky. So the proportions of this watch I really like, and I think they really fit a wider and even slightly taller style watch. It's starting to encroach a little bit on the diver style height off the wrist, but not so much. I think because it's a little bit wider case, it's just more tolerable, I think, overall. So the overall weight of this watch, I think, is good. As far as the size of the crown, it's great. It's a larger style crown. So visually, it looks very much like that Flieger style. And so I think that's a really good deal when it comes down to the size and the weight and everything that goes along with it. The fitment is excellent. I think the fitment of this watch, when it comes down to the leather strap, works really well. The holes for the pin buckle are great. It just fits really well on the wrist. The overall balance of the watch on the wrist is good, because it's a wider dial. It just tends to stay a little bit more on the wrist. When you start getting those narrower dials or narrower cases, they tend to wander around on your wrist a little bit more, unless the fitment of the watch on your wrist is really, really snug or good. And this watch, I think, because it's wider and you have good placement of the pin buckle holes on the strap, I think everything works together really well. And the overall weight, I think, is great. I love a mechanical watch that you can feel. And again, this is a manual wind mechanical watch. It has a clear case back on the back side, so that you can see the movement. And I think it's another great touch. Finish. So we're kind of going into finish with the clear case back, display case back. It's awesome. It has a sapphire crystal. It has a sunburst deep blue dial, which I think is great. The handset on here is awesome. I really like this sword style handset, because this handset is a little bit more, I don't want to say delicate, but a little bit more narrow than some of the other ones I've seen as far as the Flieger style goes. So I think it lends itself to just an easier flow from the hand to the location of where the hand is on the dial. So I like that overall look. It has the rotating turbine at the bottom. Now that looks a little bit more gadgety than maybe it should. But one of the things I was thinking about is like, well, if you had a small second hand at the 6 o'clock position, you'd have a second hand that was rotating. But I think this actually gives the watch more motion. Like the watch feels like it's more in motion with that rotating turbine, with all those blades on the turbo or on the turbine turning at that same time. So I think it just has that, I don't know, greater feel of motion. On the blade, there is a red dot that you can match up with a red dot on the dial, so that if you do need to keep track of seconds, you can do that if you need to. So the crown is really good. You only have to pull the crown out to adjust the time. There is no date on here. Easy to grip, nice grippy surface on there. Winding is great. I like the sound of the winding, and the winding itself, I think, is just puts you in closer cahoots, I guess, with the watch itself. Here's what it sounds like, which is fantastic. It has kind of that classic feel that you don't necessarily get with other watches, because they're just much more quiet, or they're just, I don't know, maybe easier to wind or that. One of the things it does not have the hacking feature. So when you pull the crown out, the second hand does continue to spin, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. And yeah, I'm just verifying that. Yep, it doesn't have the hacking movement on this particular model. So yeah, not a huge fan of that, but you can't have it all. And so moving on to accuracy, this is where I think this watch does an outstanding job. This watch is 0 seconds per day deviation and 0 beat error. And I've never seen that on any of my watches. I've never gotten zeros, especially just out of the box. Legibility and lume. Legibility, we've already talked a little bit about this. High contrast dial with the white markers. High contrast dial with the white handset. Really easy to read, and even the turbine that spins has a red dot on one of the blades that matches up with the red dot on the dial. So as far as legibility goes and keeping track of time, it does what it's designed to do, and that is a very simple timekeeping piece. So great on the accuracy and great on the legibility. Lume is good. It's not outstanding, but it's good. You're going to get a couple hours out of this overall. It has a very good look to it. I just wish it was a little bit longer lasting. So what is the overall impression? Great design on the dial, the sunburst hands, the applied markers. I think the turbine is cool. I think it just adds motion to the watch that's constant, but it's a little bit more subtle, maybe out of the way, and just adds a little bit more of a pilot feel to it, because a lot of people, when they look at this watch that are not the owners of the watch, will look at a Flieger and say, well, that's really plain, and they don't understand that this is a pilot watch and there's all these different pieces that go into the history of the watch and things like that. So this kind of puts it right out front and center. The handset is awesome. I love the crown. The accuracy, when you get double zeros like that, is incredible. You have the sapphire crystal. You have 100 meters of water resistance, a brushed case. You have a polished bezel. The strap, I think, does a great job. The rivets on the strap are good. There's one that's just a little bit off. Not a huge deal. I'm not going to, that's not a ding in my book. It's just barely off, and you really have to look at it for quite a while to notice it. So to me, that's not a big deal. What are the downsides to this watch? I can only think of one, and it's the non-hacking feature. But it's not a huge deal because I swap my watches out so much that when I set the time, it's not a huge deal that it doesn't match up completely with, the phone. I use my iPhone or whatever the time source is that I'm going to coordinate with. So hacking is not a huge deal, but it is a ding on the watch overall. Otherwise, I can't think of or see anything else at this price point with the expectations of that being rolled into this that is anything more significant than that. So 9.8 out of 10 is awesome. It's a highly recommend. Put your comments down below on this watch. What do you think of this one? What do you think of other Flieger style watches that are out there? Maybe there's some out there that are on the affordable side that I haven't seen. But if you have any other ideas, put those down there, comments. Be glad to hear that. Again, my name is Tim. This has been a Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you all next time.